is online, and when we're not getting any feedback, so we might be able to keep the whole thing on. But let's get into the presentation, and what we're going to talk about, and I'm not going to go over every single, I'm actually not going to get into much detail on how to specifically respond to all these different emergency types. The goal of this is to help people get a plan in place to address really all of these. These are all the ones that I'd come up with, just kind of off the top of my head, or ones that I've helped people write. And that's the other part of this, that if you decide that you need some help writing one of these policies or these emergency action plans, just get a hold of me, and I'm more than happy to help you with that. But in the materials tab, and that should be the ninth little tab there, should say materials with a 7 next to it. You've got 7 different attachments there that should prove to be very useful. But in showing all of these different types, sadly, active shooter is one that more and more people are having to plan and respond to. But there's a lot of these, and most of my folks that I work with don't have nearly enough of these type of emergencies planned for, and they find out the very, very hard way, how they should handle it if somebody, for instance, it happened just a couple of weeks ago, gets an arm amputated, or if God forbid we have a fatality. But I think it's also a good idea to plan for the things that are, a little bit more, a little bit more, I guess less frequent would be the better word. The ones we don't see as often, like say a bomb threat, or hopefully we're not seeing chemical spills too often. But plan for all those, because people have difficulty remembering what to do in the heat of the moment. And so really your priorities in an emergency should always stay the same, and that the first priority is people. We want to keep the people safe. We want to stop whatever it is causing the pain or causing the incident. Once we have all of the people safe and we've got everyone secure, then we can worry about the environment, or the community, maybe is a better way to say it, where we keep the incident from spreading. And then once the people and the environment or the community is safe, then we worry about property. And once again, I can provide a really good example of that. Is I had a facility fire a couple months ago, and they sent people into the warehouse, into the burning building, to try to pull out forklifts and trucks. We've got insurance to deal with the property issue, with the property or the potential property loss. We just can't risk, our folks running in trying to save those things. And we don't go to the next priority until we got the first one, the one before it's secured. And I'll say it again because it's worth saying, but the priorities are people. We keep them safe. Once they're secure, then we can worry about it, the environment. And then once we've got the people and the environment secure, we worry about the property. So the question, you're probably asking is, okay, what the heck do I do now? Now that I've shown you, 20 different emergencies that we should plan for. You need to develop a plan. And that's part of where those materials can help you, because I address most of those, potential incidents in my boilerplate policies there. But the very, very first thing you need to do with your plan is you really do need to put together an organizational chart, basically, of who's going to do what. And you need to identify everything from who's going to be, the head honcho in charge, the incident commander, if you will, to who's going to deal with the media, which is absolutely huge. It's much bigger than you would think. Because if we have the bad thing happen, you are absolutely going to have the media, contact you or show up on your property. And so with that org chart, you get all your roles and responsibilities figured out, and who's going to do it, and because it will help in structuring what your emergency, action plan is going to look like, and who handles what. And then you do need to practice it. Whether it's a tabletop exercise or you're doing, literal walkthroughs of here's what we do if, we had somebody get seriously hurt or we had somebody get an arm amputated. And I'm bringing that one up because that one happened less than 2 weeks ago. How would we handle that? And I think it's got quite a bit of value to it, to where you do the walkthrough and you have somebody pretend that they, had a serious injury, or you have somebody pretend that they are OSHA. But you've got to, once you've developed your plan and you got your org chart in place, we're going to practice it. And then the last part is that we're going to actually prepare for it, is that we're going to put together the first aid kits or the supplies or the training plan to get this all done. And it's a lot more than just doing, a fire evacuation. So first, we've got our plans developed. We're working on our plans, and we've got our people who are going to do the jobs. The very first thing you should do is figure out how you're going to get out of the building if the bad thing happens. And it's not just, if the building's on fire or we have a chemical release. It's also, if we have somebody get hurt, what's the best way to bring, emergency medical people in? I also think it's a phenomenal idea. I highly recommend that you bring in the fire department at least once a year as a walkthrough. And it's more than just having the fire marshal come in and sign off on things, but actually bring the fire department in so they know, what chemicals we've got and where they're stored and how many people that we have in the building. It costs nothing to have them come in, but you want to provide a copy of the floor plans. And if you can, on those floor plans for the fire department and for your, emergency action plan, if you could show where, say, work areas are, indicate where your fire extinguishers are, if you can indicate on there where the highest concentration of people are, it helps you develop the most effective evacuation routes and the most effective response. So with, conducting an evacuation, and we're actually required to do 2 of these a year, is we need to get some help, because most of the people on this call are probably, the safety person. But if we have an evacuation or we have the bad thing happen, you're going to absolutely need help. And what I normally do is I kind of enlist the help of my safety committee, and I make them wardens, which is just my word. You can call it whatever you would like. But I pick people who are knowledgeable about the building and the layout, and they're knowledgeable about the people that work there, because if we have to evacuate the building, the emergency medical services and the fire department, they're going to want to know if we have any employees still in the building, or if we have anybody trapped, because that is going to be their priority. Going back to the priority list, people are first, and once they've gotten all those people secured, then they can worry about it spreading. So those wardens help you quite a bit in accounting for all of your employees. And then that information becomes critical to emergency medical services, or emergency response services. So we've got everybody out of the building. We're going to make sure we got them all. And this is an area where most folks that I work with, potentially have some issues, and then we have a sign-in sheet, but we don't really make everybody sign in on it. We don't have contractors sign in on it, but all the people in our building, whether they're a visitor or a contractor or they're a vendor, we need to account for them. And so if we do have to evacuate, we need to get a head count of everybody and make sure we've got all the people evacuated, because that will be the very first thing they ask you when the fire department or paramedics show up. Do we still have any people in the building? And they won't move forward, generally with putting out the fire or anything else until they've accounted for all the people. You also should practice, and in fact, I recommend you do 1 evacuation a year, and then you do 1, I just call it an invacuation, but it's more, better known as like a shelter in place. And a lot of people don't understand why you'd want to try this or do this, but if we have a weather emergency, likely if we have a chemical emergency, we may want to evacuate or shelter in place. And so we need to decide where that's going to be, because it's with the exceptional workplace violence, to have everybody in one area so we can, help people that are going into shock, or help people that are just kind of freaking out, but decide where we want to shelter in place at, whether it's a locker room or a cafeteria or a conference room. And then once again, we would get the head count of, employees and visitors and contractors get. And I have seen this used relatively, recently within the last, year and a half or so, with a severe weather incident where we had some really significant freezing rain, and it just was flat out unsafe for people to even get on the roads. So we ended up sheltering there at the mill for about 5 or 6 hours until they could get the sand trucks out on the road and get things to where they were safe. But this is a good idea to practice this one, once a year. And you can do an invacuation and an evacuation, and that meets your requirement to perform 2 of these every year. And one of the things that gets neglected or forgotten is, if we have to leave the building, what are we going to shut down, and who's going to do it? Is there anything we need to shut down? I mean, obviously, if you have a fire, it would be in everyone's best interest to shut the gas off or the propane off. But we do need to decide if we're going to shut things down and who does it. And this is where that org chart comes in and is very handy. You probably need to get a maintenance or a millwright involved, but we also need to decide in advance what stays on. And the reason why I stress the in advance so much is that once we've evacuated the building, we don't want people going back in. Unless we're actually, doing our emergency response, and I'll get to that here in a bit. But we need to figure out the most efficient way to get everybody out of the building, while shutting off what we need shut down, and then we figure out what needs to stay on. And then I think it's always a good idea, depending on the situation, is that you're monitoring your utilities, your water, power, et cetera. Generally, when you have the bad thing happen, you have more, multiple things kind of go wrong at one time. So it's a good idea to have somebody in contact, calling the power company if we have a power failure. When can we expect it to be on? Why is it out? So you want to just keep an eye on those things as well too. Now, most of us are, tend to be somewhat remote, so we have people designated as performing CPR and first aid, and that's phenomenal. That is a very good thing. That once again should be in your org chart. I would try to avoid having your first aid responders also be your wardens, because once again, if a bad thing happens, they're going to be busy calming people down or dealing with the injured. They're going to, these designated people will be performing medical and first aid duties, dealing with people in shock. But I can't stress this enough, and this is one, and this is just speaking from a personal experience, in that I'm a hazmat emergency responder, is that people will kind of go outside of their comfort zone or what they're trained to do. We need to make sure people understand that they only do what they're trained to do. That if you first aid, but you can't do CPR, well, that's not the time to try it out. So just do only what you are trained to do. And really, quite honestly, it's what they're willing to do as well too. And that if the bad thing happens, you generally have a couple people that just kind of freeze up, that they just can't handle the pressure of the situation. It's also really important in your emergency action plan that you get the numbers down of who you may need to call. And first and foremost is going to be emergency medical services or emergency response services, and everybody knows 911 on, so that's a pretty easy one. But it's also a good idea to have your utility companies in there, to have really key vendors or suppliers in there. You definitely need to have your response in place, that if you have an incident that needs to be reported to OSHA, so if you have a fatality, you need to contact them within 8 hours. If you have somebody hospitalized, you need to contact them within 24 hours. And it's the same whether it's state or federal plans. There's just different numbers. And if you don't have those, just get in touch with me and I can get you your, say in Washington or Oregon, who you need to contact. You should have in your emergency action plan your insurance company. I'd highly recommend you have me in there or somebody from TPM so we can help you out with this. Relatively often when the bad thing happens, I'm making phone calls and getting in contact with people for my accounts. Or this is probably even more frequently, I'm en route to get there to, assist with, the serious injury or unfortunately a couple times this year with a fatality. And it's not a bad idea to have in that emergency action plan your employees' contact numbers for their friends and their emergency contacts, as well as your employees themselves. And it would be a phenomenal idea to have on the outside of your building. It's called the Knox box that the fire department has a key for and that you have a key for, that has floor plans and emergency numbers and all those things, in the box, that in case, the bad thing happens, we can get access to all that critical information. Now, as far as alarm systems go, we're all over the place as far as we've got everything from, no alarms, or we just yell if something goes wrong, or we have very complex, where there's 8 or 9 different types of alarm. And any and all of them are fine. I have more than a few people who they have air horns, handheld air horns, and that's fine. Just really train on what the different type of alarms mean. And you should have one that is really, it's a drop everything and get out of the building immediately type of alarm. You can, if you got areas where the alarm may not be heard, you can install flashing lights as your notification or as your alarm. If you do have an alarm system it should have an auxiliary power source, whether it's a battery or a gen set, so it still operates even when your power's out. And then really, getting emergency lighting is an area where a lot of folks could benefit from that. We're just setting up emergency lighting to, in essence, get people out of the building if the bad thing happens. So basic response, and actually, really responding to any, emergency, you kind of have the same steps. That if you walk in, whether it's first aid or it's a chemical release or really anything, is that you need to secure the scene. And what I mean by that is we shut down or stop whatever caused the incident, whether it's an injury or a release. And another example of this is a few months ago, I had somebody get their hand amputated in a planer, and we were responding, or they were responding to the person who had got their hand amputated next to the machine that was still running. And that's a very, simplified example, but it's a pretty good one as well, too, that we got to make sure we're stopping whatever caused the issue. And then you want to eliminate any hazards that could harm whoever is responding. And that's your folks, and that is also emergency services. And with these, you do need to have a kit or something to where you can, have universal precautions. And basically, this is kind of the same, it's kind of the same thing, whether it's bloodborne pathogens or chemical response, but you need to have goggles and you need to have gloves. Bloodborne pathogens requires, a few other things. And with chemical response, it does require its own special, group of precautions, but it should be in your response kits where you have the ability to go in, and if somebody's hurt, somebody's seriously injured, you've got gloves and a face shield or goggles or glasses or an apron, something to protect yourself against that exposure. And a lot of people have responded to these severe incidents, with amputations and things of that nature, and they jumped in and were helping the person without, using any universal precautions. And that's, that just is what they are willing to do, but it should be part of your plan that you've got that equipment in place to protect our folks. If you do have an injury, it's ideally have somebody else contact 911. so we can keep someone focused on that injured person. It's a good idea to have somebody who's the, quote unquote incident commander, that's all they do is direct everybody. So you'd have a first aid person handling the injured person. You'd have a gatekeeper, let's call it, who's going to call 911 and direct them into, where the bad thing is happening, whether it's an injured person or, we got to direct them to the back of the building where we got the chemical release or the fire. Precious moments are lost by, when the emergency responders don't really know where to go. And that's another benefit of having the fire department, come walk through your facility. But, I was asked, what are your priorities medically? If you do have somebody that's hurt, and it literally is in this order, we worry about, the ABCs, which is, are they breathing? Do they have a heartbeat? And then we control the bleeding if we've got, serious bleeding going on. And, going back to we don't do anything more than we're trained to do. Tourniquets are one of those things that if you don't know how to do a tourniquet, don't. Because you can really, you can kill somebody by doing a tourniquet incorrectly. So if you're not trained to do one, then all you can do is apply pressure to it. After we've controlled bleeding and we worry about shock, which is one of the more common, medical emergencies that you'll see. We deal with open wounds and burns next, fractures. And then once we've kind of got everything stabilized medically, then we worry about transportation. And it may be quite a bit faster for somebody to jump in a car and take the injured person to the hospital. But hopefully we've had somebody call a 911 and paramedics are already on their way. But I have had an incident where paramedics were, over 20 minutes away. And so they had to do quite a bit of medical management of a really, really seriously injured person. And they did a phenomenal job. But thankfully, it was something that they had trained and had prepared for, and that training paid off. And I get this, a lot as far as the first aid classes go. Okay, what the heck do I do for somebody in shock? And shock is a tough one because it can manifest in 20 different ways. But basically, you're looking for people that, that are hyperventilating, they have an issue focusing, they just are overloaded with what's going on. So if you can, you have them lie down. In the face is pale, you raise their tail, you raise the feet. If their face is red, you raise their head. That just means they're either getting too much blood to their upper body or they're not getting enough blood to their upper body. We want to kind of loosen tight clothing, respectfully and all of those things. But you want to keep them warm and dry. Don't give them anything. You don't give them any medicine. You don't actually want to give them water. You want to just be there and talk to them, calm them down, and then after that, we'd worry about transport. There is no cure-all for somebody being in shock. It is a time heals all wounds kind of thing. That is something that, as far as what we're able to do, there's nothing we can do immediately that's going to, get rid of somebody being in shock. We just have to be there for them and talk. And if you've had to respond to a serious injury or a serious incident, there's going to be a lot of talking and calming people down going on. That is a pretty common activity, and that's another place where those wardens are hugely beneficial. So you do need to have, well, no, I take that back. You don't have to have an emergency response plan, but this is, what do we do if we're going to go back into the building? And we're going to be the ones going in and trying to take care of the bad thing. And where this would be somewhat more common is for a chemical spill or release. Some places they have a team where they've got their people that are going to go in and deal with that spill or that release. But you need to have it as equally in depth and another org chart and everything for the response plan of what we've got to do to go back in the building. And that's going to be part of your whole disaster recovery plan, and that's the third leg to this stool. So we got our emergency action plan where we get out of the building, in essence, the emergency response plan that we're going back into the building to fight it, and then after everything's done and is finished out, then we have our disaster recovery plan. And this is of the three different plans that we're talking about, this is probably the more difficult or challenging one, in that it's really a business continuity plan. How are we going to, we got accounts payable, accounts receivable, we got payroll, we've got all of the day-to-day things that we do as a business, that if you've had a fire, you need to have an idea where you're going to go to be doing those things. How are we going to get these all done if we have to go to a hotel conference room, or we have to go to another business here in town? It's a tough one that a lot of people have issues with, that we're scrambling, and it makes your life a lot easier if you at least have a plan before the bad thing happens, because that is very difficult, and there's a lot more to it than people expect. During this whole thing, you want to account for your employees, and I'm not meaning a head count, or you want to know how they're doing and where they are at, and that's where the Employee Assistance Program, also called EAP, can be really beneficial. And I've seen it with a couple of fatalities this year where the coworkers were extremely shaken up by the incident, and multiple employees had issues even going back into work. It was almost kind of like a PTSD type of situation. In one instance, the employee actually saw the coworker that got killed. You may want to do limited production. I mean, this is going to be, once again, what your disaster recovery plan is. But if you had part of your facility burned down, which has happened this year, you're only going to be able to do limited production. And just walk through of how you're going to if you lost your planer mill, okay, how are we going to get that done? Are we going to send it to another mill to do, or are we going to set up something off-site? But you want to line all those things up, and then just plan on notifying your vendors, and then also plan on notifying your customers, at least your big ones, of how we're going to do that, and more importantly, who's going to do it. Just like with the media aspect of things, you want to have one person generally in charge of that, of what the message is going to be and who's going to deliver it. And and this gets bigger every year, but you do need to have a plan for social media, of monitoring that and what message you're going to deliver, because if they say rumor fills a vacuum, but and it's true, if we don't put any information out there, generally somebody puts some generally erroneous or inaccurate information out there, and now we've got to fight that as well too. So you want to have a social media plan or an aspect of this as well. So what will happen in an emergency? These are things that haven't done a 40 or so chemical response emergencies. These are some things that pretty much guarantee that are going to happen. Is that someone will lead. Somebody will choose to be a leader. And that may not seem like a bad thing. It really can be if it's someone who doesn't know what to do. So we need to identify who, in that emergency action plan, who our leader is going to be. And it's not a bad idea to have an idea who the backup is going to be. Because this is the other thing I can almost guarantee will happen in an emergency. Someone will forget everything they ever learned. It will all leak out their ears. And that just is what it is. It's going to happen. But that's where having your plan printed out and having it, down on paper, and you have steps are so huge. It's so important. And that, you may be the most practiced and calm person, during the day, but once the bad thing happens, it might just catch you on a bad day and you're the one who forgot everything. That's where the plan can save you and get you back on track. Almost regardless of the emergency, somebody's going to freak out. And, you want to calm them down, and then you generally want to move them away from the the large group if they're having, a real kind of emotional breakdown, or they're because that stuff is contagious. But I do find it really helps with that person who's freaking out to give them a very, very simple task. With a severe injury that we had a few months ago, the person that was kind of freaking out, we had them go collect a bunch of coats and jackets so we could put them over the person that was hurt. And you give them kind of a one-step job, and it worked very well to calm them down and get them back into the situation. Something's going to break, something's going to be missing, something will be lost. We're just going to have to adapt. We're going to have to improvise a solution for that, and you'll get through it. Generally, the most common one is we think something's in the chemical spill kit, or we think something's in the first aid kit, or even should be, and it's gone. And we can't let that stop our response, so we got to figure out some way to make it happen. You're also almost always going to have somebody who's willing to take the big risk, and what I mean by that is, and I can give you sadly a very good example of this. Is a few years ago, we had a grower, a farmer, that went down in the boot pit of his grain storage, his grain bin, and there was a ton of rotted grain down there, and the atmosphere was oxygen deficient, and it had a few other things wrong with it too. But he collapsed. And so his first son jumped down in to try to pull him out, and then he collapsed. And then the second son jumped down in to try to get him out, and then he ended up collapsing. And so we had 3 people all die, in this situation, that somebody's going to be willing to do something really dangerous trying to fix things. You cannot add more bodies to the count. Get your plan. It's going to be very hard for some people because you're going to have people that'll believe they can run into the burning building and pull somebody out. And we just got to stick to the plan. We cannot add more people to the body count. And then there'll always be something, no matter how good or practiced you are, there'll be something that is done wrong. And that, so be it. That's why we have why I would recommend you have a debrief. You have a meeting after the response. Figure out, okay, here's what we did right. This is great. Here's what we did wrong. Here's how we can do it better next time. Because you will learn a lot from that debrief. It's really, really beneficial. So this is the form that I've been working on, and Shelly is making a prettier version of this, but it's I found it throughout my career really, really useful. And then basically what this is, it's a one-page thing that you can have a summary of, just the bullet points of what we do for each of the bad things. We have severe weather, well, here are the steps you take. And that would be on the front page of all of the bad things we want to be worried about or we want to have a plan for, because this thing is just a fantastic reminder. Oh, well, okay, here's what I do. Here's what I need to do. And then the back page of it is also, some do's and don'ts and some other things to remember. But more importantly, it would have all of your phone numbers of everybody that you need to contact on the emergency services side, all the way to, OSHA and the state police and all of those things, to your people in your response team, to employees or key employees. So it's kind of a one-page thing that I'm a big believer in, that you always have on you if you're on the response team or you're a member of management. And it's pretty easy to have that one-page thing, in your planner or in your pocket or in your car or at your home, because it does, rarely do the bad thing, does the emergency happen right when we're sitting at our desk ready to receive it. It tends to be something at 2 a.m. or something at 5:45 at night after we've just left. So this is on there, and this is the I think it's called the emergency procedures sheet that's on there. It's a Word document. It is not write protected. You can go in here and edit and do whatever you would like to with it. I didn't plug in any phone numbers because there's really, everybody's going to be a little bit different. But what I would add on here is my number or the number here at TPM, and I can send you my cell. I think I've got it at the end of the presentation. But because I've had people call me in just the last couple of months who were in the middle of the emergency or the catastrophe, and they honestly just weren't really sure what to do. And so if I can help in that sense of calm things down or remind you the direction you need to go, I'm honored and happy to do that. So the disaster preparation and recovery is a little bit more than just putting a first aid kit and buying an AED. There's a lot to it, but the biggest part of it is just having a plan. And even if all you do is you build the plan and you walk through it mentally, then that's a heck of a lot better than just having some, first aid kits or a spill kit kicking around. Figure out who's going to do what and when and how they're going to do it. And then the recovery part of it is almost guarantee you that it's bigger than Sandra, yeah, they're available. I can email them to you, but they're in your materials tab. Should be 7 attachments, including the presentation that you can get after, or you can just email me after the webinar and I'll send it to you directly. But the disaster recovery part of, okay, we had the bad thing happen, how do we recover? That's, kind of a sleeping tiger, and that it's a lot bigger than most people realize. But it literally can save you a ton of time and quite a bit of money and issues just having a plan for, okay, how do we start things back up again? And that's the part that most of my accounts, it just kind of gets forgotten or we don't plan for. But we just figure we'll deal with it, if we have to. So this is the end of the presentation. And I just want to reiterate again that as you're going through this and you're developing your plan and you are saying, okay, we need to think about, fires and chemical spills and active shooter, whatever emergencies you feel like you need to have a plan for. If you need some help writing it or you want a boilerplate, policy or procedure, please get a hold of me. I'm happy to do it. There should be in the attachments 3 different emergency action plans for you to kind of pick and choose from. There is training materials, there are some posting materials, and then there's that sheet that I've found to be super useful, that where you just kind of plug in, a map of your facility, and then here's the bullet points that if you have the emergency happen, here's what you do, and then you flip it over and, here's who you call. I would highly recommend that, was maybe the first place you start in that. So you at least have that, that you can give to managers and supervisors and you've got something started. And it's very, it's very high level. It's not going to get into the nitty gritty, but man, it's handy to have. But I'm going to wrap up here in a bit. I'm going to leave this up so you can get my email or that's my cell phone number. That if you want to get a hold of me to help write these procedures or policies, or, hopefully you won't ever have to call me because you had the catastrophe happen, but, that's what I'm here for. And this has been a bad year in our industry, and that there's been quite a few of them this year. And, don't be shy about getting a hold of me. That's what I'm here to do. But I want to thank everybody. Hopefully this is kind of got you started or got you steered in the right direction, and starting this whole procedure, because it is a big procedure. Doing the emergency action plan, then your emergency response plan, and then your disaster recovery plan. There is a lot to it, but you've got quite a bit there in the attachments that's going to help you get a lot of that work done, and then I can help you with the rest of it. But I just wanted to thank everybody. That is going to do it. I'll leave the contact information up there for just another minute or so, but that is it. And I really appreciate your time. And, I'm looking forward to, talking to folks about writing these policies and procedures. Take care, everybody. Thank you.